All right, so this will kick off this new series I'm starting called Teams to Remember. And basically, the premise of this series is to talk about teams, A's, Raiders, Warriors, or Sharks, that didn't necessarily make it all the way to the finals or win the championship, but they were memorable enough to talk about and maybe had a good season, made a playoff run. And so we're going to start with a fairly recent one, the 2020 Oakland Athletics, a team that ended up winning the American League West for the first time since 2013. So a 7-year drought, and they finally won the AL West in 2020. Obviously, the A's that year and every other team had to play a shortened 60-game season. And so the A's finished first in the division, 36-24, 600 win percentage. And the A's, did something that they weren't able to accomplish in 14 years, which is win a playoff series. They won their first playoff series since 2006. And they beat the Chicago White Sox in the wild card round in 3 games. That was a very good series. But the A's, unfortunately, would lose to the Houston Astros in 4 games in the American League Division Series. So, let's take a look a little bit at the details. So the A's in this season, obviously no fans at games. It was a shortened season. And I was a little bit worried at first when MLB shortened the season because I was thinking MLB fluctuates so much. It's not like football or basketball where, it can stay fairly consistent throughout the whole season. Baseball, teams will be streaky, teams will go on runs, and if we only have 60 games, how are teams supposed to recover from losing streaks? You can't. That's the answer. You absolutely can't. The World Series champion in 2019, Washington Nationals, missed the playoffs because they, weren't hot enough in the right moment. It just goes to show. So, yeah, the A's that year, they were a very competitive team, and they played very well, obviously only really playing the local teams. And the thing with the A's is they started out really well, and they went on a big win streak sort of at the beginning of the year. And I think really the cause of their fall towards the end was the fact that they couldn't really win consistently at the end of the season. That sort of led to their downfall. And also, we got to remember, with these statistics, you kind of have to take them with a grain of salt due to the lack of games. Yeah, in this season, Matt Olsen hit 195, which is pretty bad average-wise, but he led the team in homers with 14. And he was huge this year. I mean, this year the A's had a lot of walk-off home runs, a lot of walk-offs. I mean, the first game of the season, they got a walk-off grand slam against the Angels. And the A's this year, it was just a really fun team. The A's also had a pretty good season from Marcus Semien, and they were looking like a legitimate contender, being one of the best teams in baseball. They weren't quite the best team in the American League. That was the Tampa Bay Rays, who, of course, were the American League pennant champs. But the A's were basically tied for second in American League standing and really tied for third, if you think about it, in all of baseball because the Dodgers had the best record in the Bigs. So the A's won the division pretty easily, but I was still worried about Houston. The A's won the division by 7 games in 2020, and yet I was still worried because the Astros, if I know one thing about the Astros, it's that they always kind of come back from being down, and they also come back from haters. I was obviously following a cheating scandal coming out, and people were mad at them, but there was no fans to hate on them at the games, and so that sort of worked to their advantage. One diamond in the rough was Tommy La Stella for the A's. He obviously was only on them for a short time. They traded Franklin Barreto for him to the Angels, and he hit 289 that season. Very good season for him. He only had 1 homer, but he was very efficient at the plate. His defense was also very good. Mark Canha had a great season too. I mean, his batting average wasn't amazing, but he did have 33 RBIs that year. The A's pitching also was pretty strong. Sean Manaea, was sort of carrying with a presence on the mound usually. Jesus Luzardo was sort of becoming a guy that we could rely on in the lineup. Mike Fiers was still there. Obviously, the A's pitching was really good. And the guy that obviously I'm not going to leave out, Liam Hendricks, our closer, he was absolutely amazing. I mean, in Game 3 of the wild card series against the Chicago White Sox, I mean, he clutched up, and then, of course, he eventually joined them in the offseason. But besides the point, the A's really were strong. And their best pitcher that year, probably Mike Fiers. He was 6-3 that year. His ERA was pretty high, though. In terms of ERA, though, it was Chris Bassett. He was 5-2 with a 2.29 ERA. No all-star team that year, but you had to think he might have been an all-star that year. But also Liam Hendricks, best ERA on the team, 1.78. And J.B. Wendelken also had a very good ERA, 1.8 ERA. Yusmeiro Petit did good that year too with a 1.6. So the A's bullpen was very good. Their starting pitch rotation was pretty good as well. Frankie Montas was also becoming a pretty established player in the lineup. And so the A's were strong. Now we head into the wild card series. The A's, of course, lost the first game, and we had to face Lucas Giolito. He's a very good pitcher, and that was a struggle. And then, of course, the A's would, from there, it's a best of three series, so they would win both. They would win out, and that last game was nerve-wracking. It was an ups and down type of game, and it was really hard. The A's had Luzardo on the mound for game one, and Giolito was really good, and the A's really couldn't get their offense going, but the A's lost that game one. But putting Chris Bassett on the mound for game two was genius, because the A's were able to take over that game and tie up the series at one. And also, you got to remember, the A's had to play 2 straight win or go home games. And the A's were not going to go home easy. I mean, yeah, they weren't, the best team in baseball, but they were too good to lose in the wild card round. And obviously, it was a weird playoff format, too. That's sort of off topic. The A's had Mike Fiers on the mound in game 3, and it was against Dane Dunning, and that was a very good game. I mean, you got to give Liam Hendricks credit. Then we went to the ALDS, and the A's sort of were dominated the whole time. It was a best-of-5 series, and the A's had one really good win. And Chad Pinder, I remember, did really good that series. Sean Murphy kind of put his head out there as a guy who could be in this lineup consistently. And so, yeah, I mean, the A's hit a lot of homers. I remember they tied their franchise record for the most homers in a playoff game. But it was really depressing when they lost, because you kind of knew that changes were going to come. They had a lot of guys that were sort of on 1-year type of deals. Obviously, Simeon would leave after this. Hendricks would leave. La Stella would leave, and the A's kind of went down from there. This is our most recent playoff appearance, and I don't know when we're going to go back to the playoffs, but I sort of reminisce about this season in particular. And their final record was 36-24 in the regular season, which is a very strange record for baseball, but due to the shortened season, that's what happened. But they lost the division series 3-1 to the Astros. And, I think this season was just kind of showed that the A's, they're a team that could really thrive in the regular season, but when they had to play a division rival in the postseason, it was really difficult for them. And it's hard because, we obviously played the Astros in the regular season. We were 7 games ahead of them in the series. In the standings. And so I thought we would win, but part of me also thought the Astros are a very good team. They have a chip on their shoulder, and I've never really gotten over that. I think the fact that we lost to the Astros, because you got to remember, the Astros forced a Game 7 against Tampa. If we beat the Astros in that series, I mean, who knows what would have happened. I think the A's maybe could have been a World Series contender. I think they already were a World Series contender, but we, beaten the Dodgers in the regular season. I don't know. It's hypothetical, but that's going to do it, guys. The 2020 Oakland Athletics, very good team, very interesting team. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Keep stay tuned, I guess, on this series, because I'll do more. That's going to do it, guys.